don't take your actions for granted. When you speak up, you're influencing people. When you choose to stay silent, you're influencing people. When you take action, you're influencing people. But if you're a bystander, that's influencing people. So you're always influencing people. So please lead with intent. Be mindful of your power. Be mindful of your leadership power and lead with intent.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Schuster. Food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. I'm your host, Dr. Richard. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, and whatever you do, this is the show that is going to help you become the best version of yourself. Each episode, you will hear from some of the most amazing, talented, and successful people on the planet who followed their passions and strive to help others. Join our movement to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others. Together, we're going to make the world a better place. Are you ready? Because it's time for your Daily Helping. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Daily Helping Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard, and we have a phenomenal guest today. He is the founder and CEO of LEADx with a mission to spark the next 100 million leaders through the use of AI-powered leadership coaching. He's also the host of the LEADx Leadership Podcast, a Forbes columnist, and he's a New York Times bestselling author of 9 books, including 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management, and his latest, Great Leaders Have No Rules, Contrarian Leadership Principles to Transform Your Team and Business. Our guest today, Kevin Kruse. Welcome to the show, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
Dr. Richard, it's great to be on. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. There's so many places we could go. I know you're one of the most respected experts in the leadership space, but I want to take a step back. And I do this with a lot of people because it's so interesting how people's paths lead them to what they're doing today. You're using AI-powered leadership, which is very unique, and we're definitely going to talk about it. But take us back to the beginning. What really put you on the path you're on today?
Well, the path I'm on today, I would say there's two paths. One is a pursuit and a passion of leadership and leadership development. And the second is the path of being an entrepreneur, which you can relate to. And I saw, when I was a teen, I saw my father try to be an entrepreneur himself, and it failed miserably and, lost everything, lost our house. And actually that experience as a teen made me feel like I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. Rather than it scaring me away from the path of entrepreneurship, I sort of knew very early on that I wanted to, have my own future in my own hands. So I've started several companies from the age of 22 on, pursuing entrepreneurship, which is very challenging, but also very, very rewarding. And what I learned is when I was in my 20s, my first companies crashed and burned. And it really was because I didn't understand how to manipulate time. And I didn't understand leadership and influence. And on that second part, I mean, it's embarrassing to talk about it now, but I was so young and dumb when it came to leadership that, I literally always thought I was the smartest person in the room. I thought I had all the right answers, so I could just tell people what to do or override their decisions or make a decision and force it through. And as I said, those companies failed in my early and mid 20s. And it was only later that I truly understood the importance of, if you want to do big things, great things, you can't do it yourself. You can't do it all on your own. You need a team. You need a team of teams. And so it's about grabbing the best talent and then supporting them. And the more I focused just on creating a culture that drives engagement and less on the details of the business, the running of the business, the better the teams did, the better the companies did. And, it became first it was a $2 million company. Then I started and sold a $7 million company. Eventually, it was a $35 million company, and it's been on and on. And the path is the less time I spent in the company and the more time as a percent I spent on just leadership and culture, the better the companies always did. And I also learned some hard lessons along the way. I with a company that I sold just over 10 years ago, I learned that while the company was a success, I wasn't thinking about leadership at home. And my marriage blew up within weeks of selling that business at this life-changing lottery ticket winning thing. And within weeks, the whole family structure disintegrated. And I wasn't really thinking about leading proactively inside of the family. And so to me, leadership is a superpower. If leadership is influence, it's a superpower that, we can influence ourselves to get off the couch and get on the treadmill. We're going to remarkably change our health and our quality of life. If we can lead in our relationship with others, we're going to have remarkably better relationships with our teenagers and with our significant others. And then, of course, at work, if we can influence others, we can build amazing companies. So it was this dual interest in entrepreneurship and then hard lessons learned on the path to leadership that made me just very respectful of the power of leadership. And so after taking about 8 years off, I decided, I saw this advance in artificial intelligence and what IBM Watson was doing. And I said, okay, behavior change is hard. But if we're now at a point where they're actually using artificial intelligence for cognitive behavioral therapy and getting, interesting positive results, I'm talking specifically about Stanford and WOBOT, WOEBOT. I'm like, you can't really train leadership, but leadership coaching, executive coaching does work very well. Why don't we start applying AI technology to this world of executive coaching? If it's getting some results in psychology and CBT, maybe we can get some positive results for leadership change as well. So that's how we got to where I am today.
I want to take a deeper dive into that. And it's interesting you mentioned the WOBOT. I was privileged enough to see a therapy session using that. And
how'd it go?
It worked.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that, and I imagine this applies to leadership as well, what the research found was that people were actually, in some respects, more engaged with a bot than they would be with a person, because they knew that an artificial intelligence construct isn't judging them. Right. And so sometimes in therapy, we use the term therapeutic alliance is the fancy term that just basically means you trust your therapist. And so there was immediate trust because they felt that they weren't being judged by this bot. And I imagine, particularly, when you're dealing with C-suite people or high level executives, there's some of that, and there's ego as well. So I want to ask you, have you seen any of the research that's been done on AI in the executive coaching realm?
Well, there's almost no research being done.
I figured there wouldn't be much.
Yeah, we're doing some, and it's very early on. And the kind of research we've started with has been things like we asked 1,000 frontline managers, if your company offered you for free a human executive coach to get better at something, would you want one? And I think it was 83%, 83.1% said yes. Now already I thought that was interesting. 1 out of 5 people wouldn't want a coach, even if it was offered for free. And so they think they're good enough. They think they don't have the time. Like, I don't know. That's kind of weird. And when we asked if you were offered a AI-powered robot executive coach for free, would you want one? And only half, 43%, said they would want one. So there was a bias, right? So most people said, no, I wouldn't want that. So then we asked why. And the two big groupings, most people said they didn't want an AI-powered coach because either, one, they just said, I don't think it would work. Like, it just wouldn't be beneficial if it wasn't human. So they don't really understand how it works or that it does work and all the rest. The second was fear. And it was fears of things like, I don't want to help other humans be put out of a job, or I would be afraid of what the robot would do with what it would know about me. So it's just these weird, sci-fi robots are evil type stuff,
right?
Or just not thinking it's going to be powerful enough. But Dr. Richard, I've got a question for you that I've been curious about. So a very common thing that we encounter when we talk about executive coaching, people will often say, well, can I pick my human coach? Because personality matters, fit matters. We want to make sure it's a good fit. And in fact, other coaching companies out there make a big deal about their algorithms where we will match you with the exact human coach for you because fit is so important. And I would think that the same arguments would be made to therapy, right? So it's like, you need to have a fit with a therapist. I want to pick my therapist so there's the right fit. But the fact that Wobot can be effective is not about personality fit, because it's one Wobot for every patient, right? And so what are your thoughts about the importance of personality fit with your therapist and or with your coach?
Hey guys, Dr. Richard here. For the past 7 years, I've been privileged to bring you incredible guests who are changing the world and can help you become the best version of yourself. I'm really excited to share with you a new quiz that I created based on my clinical training that will curate for you a custom list of my top episodes and actionable strategies to help you wherever you are on your journey. All you need to do is go to drrichardschuster.com to take it, and it's 100% free. You'll be taking the next step on the journey to unlocking the power of you, and I can't wait to see where you'll go.
Well, I'll tell you what the research shows, generally speaking, is that people make a big deal about, I'm this kind of a therapist or that kind of a therapist. You mentioned cognitive behavior therapy, and some people use different solutions focus. There's like 5 million different flavors of therapy. And what the research shows is that at the end of the day, the type of therapy doesn't matter. Whether or not a male is matched with a female or a female is matched with a female, none of that really matters. What it really boils down to is, can the two people, and it's really on the patient more so than the therapist, can they just trust that person? So the fit is really just trust. And the research shows that if the therapist trusts their clinician, there's going to be a greater likelihood of success, no matter what they're implementing. So I would expect that would translate to coaching as well. And listen, I'm in the assessment world, so I understand algorithms, and that stuff has its place, to be sure. But you can have an algorithm that says, you're the greatest person in the world, and at the end of the day, you're a guy from Philly. If if you're an Eagles guy and your therapist comes in rocking a New York Giants, baseball hat,
I'd say, get out of here.
That's right. That's what I'm saying, right? So
I don't trust you.
There's always external factors that play into trust, but that's really where it begins and ends. If the trust isn't there, the therapy just won't.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it all comes down to trust. That's great.
So this is good stuff, and I think the AI is so interesting because it's cutting edge. The fears that people have of Skynet taking over,
Skynet, right,
is interesting. So I want to come back to it, but I certainly want to pause and give time to talk about your latest best-selling book, because it's so intriguing to me. Great leaders have no rules. Contrarian leadership principles to transform your team and business. So I like this because I do know that a lot of leaders were mavericks, and they were the kids that ate spaghetti for breakfast when everybody else was eating French toast. But talk to us about what made you want to write that book, and then I want to just take a high-level overview of it.
Yeah, and I think the publisher did a horrible job with that book, and the title is a little bit misleading because it's not about being a rule breaker. It's not about breaking rules or being a rebel. It's the problem with rules themselves. And certainly, there's laws we should all follow, and there's some rules that are inevitable that are for our safety and protection. What I'm talking about, though, is the problem where in organizations, people get crazy with rules, processes, and every time we bump into a rule, it takes away the opportunity for us to make a choice. And when that choice is gone, it becomes a little bit more your company instead of my company or our company. And this came from, the title of the book and this idea around rules, that's really just one of the 10 chapters. There's other things like why you should close your open door policy, why you want to play favorites, all these other contrarian things. But the genesis of this was when I sold my company 15 years ago. I merged in, I reported the CEO as a partner, and the CEO said, Kevin, don't think of me as your boss. Like, we're all equals here. You and I have, equal votes. We have equal power. We're just partners looking to take this to the next level. That sounded really great. That motivated me. I felt engaged. And then about 30 days in, I had submitted my first expense report as an employee of this new, organization. And it came back and it was about $4 short, like the check. Not a big discrepancy, but I thought maybe I filled it out wrong. So I emailed Don, our chief financial officer. Don, did I fill something out wrong? It's like $4.32 short. He emails me back. He says, no, you didn't do anything wrong. He says, we don't reimburse for Post-it notes. So then I emailed him back. Why? He emailed me back. It's a wasteful expense. So I bumped into my first rule 30 days in. Now, how much, when I am not allowed to reimburse for Post-it notes, I've got a rule that I cannot get $4 back for these office supplies that I bought. How much of an equal partner did I feel? How much of a co-CEO did I feel like? How much did I feel like I can build this company in the future when I can't even buy Post-it notes? So I found out that this was disengaging many people. There were a lot of these little rules like this in expense reimbursement. Another senior level leader tried to submit a beer that he had ordered with his dinner while traveling. They deducted the $3 for the beer. He could have bought a $4 milkshake, but not a $3 beer because the rule was we don't reimburse for alcohol. So I went to the CEO and explained, what are you doing? This is crazy. Why is this in place? It's making everyone feel like they've got no choice or decisions around here. And he, to his credit, he immediately apologized. He said, Kevin, I didn't know that was bumming people out. Fine. You want to buy Post-it notes? Troy wants to buy a beer. Go ahead. You guys can do that. But let me tell you why the rule is there. It says one of our values, it's on the wall, is growth and profit. Now, that sounds kind of funny to have an actual value about making money. But he had a whole story. He's like, look, our purpose is not to make money, but you need to make money to pursue your purpose. The purpose of life is not to breathe, but you need to breathe to pursue life. So being frugal was a value. And he said, I used to walk around here and people had these Post-it notes and they would just doodle on them as they were in meetings and on phone calls. They'd write phone messages on them. He says, you know what I use when I want to doodle or I want to make a phone message? And he reaches over on the side of his desk and he has a scrap paper. He had taken printer paper that he had run. He'd torn it twice. And he had these raggedy little pieces of paper that he used to jot notes on. He says, that doesn't cost anything. I'm just using the garbage paper for that stuff. So for him, the no Post-it note rule was a symbol of frugality. It was an action to reinforce a value. And so even though he did away with that rule, I ended up staying in that company for 5 years. And I never once bought Post-it notes because I wanted to be a team player. I wanted to be a good senior partner. I wanted to live the values of the company. But the difference was we had a conversation about it, right? And so every time we bump into a rule, a dress code rule, a how much to spend when you travel rule, a you can't send this proposal out until it gets 3 signatures rule, until someone reviews it. Every rule that takes away the opportunity for us to make a choice about, hey, what should I do here? What would represent the values of the company? What would represent the goals and pursuit of the goals of the company? When it becomes someone else's choice, it's someone else's company, and that disengages us. So the whole idea of great leaders, have no rules, it's really they make no rules or as few rules as possible. Because it would have been very different if part of my onboarding process was, hey, Kevin, let's talk about our value of growth and profit. It's a weird one, right? What do you think about it? Here's what we think about. How might we live here at work to live this value and set a good example for others? Oh, those are some good ideas, Kevin. I've got one. I never buy Post-it notes because blah, blah, blah. It would have been a whole different thing. We would have co-created the standard, the practice rooted in values. When I launched the book, there was a fairly well-known leadership coach who wrote publicly on one of my social media feeds when she saw great leaders have no rules. She says, almost, Kevin, but I tell my team, we only have one rule. You can never, ever lie to me. And at first I sort of thought about that. I thought, well, that's true. That's you never would want anyone to lie to you. And that's a pretty good rule. I mean, it's about trust and integrity and all the rest. But then I thought, wait a minute. New team members come on board and you tell them there's only one rule. You can never lie to me. How does that make you feel? It's almost accusatory. It's like, okay, she's the boss and I'm following the boss's rule. It's her team. It's not my team. What if instead she said, hey, Dr. Richard, you're on my team now. Let's talk about values. What's important to you? okay, here's what's important to me. My most important value is actually integrity and truth and honesty. What would it look like? Is that important to you too? You'd be like, well, yeah, heck yeah. I would want you to be honest with me. Great. It's a shared value. It's one of our highest values. Would people who live that value on this team lie to each other? Of course not. No, it's a co-created standard rooted in a value. So even the obvious rules, like even a lot of safety rules, I say, look, unless it's mandated by law, FEMA or whatever, I don't know who regulates OSHA, all these laws, unless it's like literally you have no choice as a company but to put it. It's better to co-create your safety standards so that everybody can hold each other accountable. And a lot of sports teams, in the research for the book, a lot of coaches said that. They said, it's too easy to be a leader, a manager who just runs around with the rule book, measuring different things and looking at the clock. That's being a rule enforcer. That's not being a leader. And so most great sports teams, they'll let the rules, quote unquote rules, come up from the team members themselves, from the players themselves. There's often a team captain, and they'll rally. It's like, hey, what are the standards for our team? And let's hold each other accountable. Way more powerful than a coach that says, we've got 10 rules around here and it's my way or the highway. Usually that's rebellion. And you mentioned the New York Giants. They had some experience with early Tom Coughlin, implementing crazy rules that they all rebelled against. So that's sort of the premise of the big idea in that book.
I like that. We don't. You said there's 10 rules. We don't have time to go through them all, but that's very interesting. And we'll have a link to your book in the show if anyone wants to find out the other 9. Very cool. I want to circle back because AI is something we talked about a little in the beginning, and what led you to that. And I know you've got LEADx, and your mission is pretty ambitious. So talk to us about LEADx as an organization and what you're doing with it today.
Yeah. Well, we were working in stealth mode for 2 years, and we released just over a year ago. We call her Coach Amanda. That's just the personification of the coach. And it's a lot of technology. We're using IBM Watson as the AI that's driving it. And anybody can just go onto the Apple App Store or the Android App Store and just download LEADx, LEADx, and you can try it and see how you like it. It's what we've done is our goal is not to mimic a coaching conversation. We think a lot of the success of a coach relationship is in the process. A typical human coach would do some sort of assessment, and whether that's a 360 assessment or a personality assessment, there's often some data gathering. Then, the person being coached will set a goal. What do I want to get better at? What's my action plan? What am I going to do each week for the however many weeks? And the coach is often the accountability buddy. Hey, Kevin, you said you were going to try this thing in meetings this week. Did you do it? Or you said you were going to do this, have this conversation with your boss. Did you do it? How did it go? And it's this accountability partner and reflection and feedback over time that can lead to behavior change. And that's exactly what Coach Amanda and the LEADx app does. We support dozens of assessments, whether it's DISC or MBTI or Insights or EQI or all these other ones. There's a resiliency one. There's a growth mindset one. And so it's a data gathering. It's picking a goal. Coach Amanda will recommend an action plan, 12 things to do in 12 weeks to get better at accountability or feedback or developing your growth mindset. And Amanda will send you nudges on your phone to help keep you on track, help keep you motivated. She'll check in with you once a week, ask for your reflection on the activities. And over time, progress is made. And what we've seen, we're still early. Like robot coaches 10 years from now will be like crazy developed compared to where they are today. But already 83% of the people who try Coach Amanda want to keep her. So remember that the same percent that would want a human coach now would want Coach Amanda. And it used to be 43%. So people are scared of the robot coach until they get one. And they're like, oh, well, this isn't that scary. And actually, it's way more effective than I thought it would be. On average, people talk to Coach Amanda twice a week. We've done limited behavior change studies. We've seen increases in employee engagement, increases in productivity, reductions in stress after just 4 weeks. So we're very early on, but it's very encouraging. And we're working primarily with larger companies who are trying to roll out affordable coach-like experiences. Because a human coach, we always say, if you could afford a human coach, Dr. Richard, they should get a human coach. And whatever coaches charge different fees. Harvard Business Review says about $500 an hour is the average. And so if you can afford that for your managers, that's great. But usually human coaches are given to the CEO, the VPs, maybe some directors, because they're so expensive. We're saying now, because it's in the form of an app, every manager can have a coach. It's a robot coach. Literally 1/100th to 1/1000th the price of a human coach. You can get a coach-like experience that will give you significant improvement in the areas that you want to focus on.
I love that. And so the 83% is interesting that people are having a really good experience with it. What have been the roadblocks? What are the 17% of people saying who don't want it?
So the number one variable, as I'm sure you would guess, Dr. Richard, it's their own motivation. It's self-motivation. And so unlike therapy or most executive coaching sessions, like with most leadership coaches that are humans, the person in that relationship, they're volunteering for it or they're motivated for it. So you're at a high level and they say, hey, we're going to get you better at this one area, or based on your performance reviews to get to the next level, you're going to work on these things. Here's a coach. So you're motivated for that. With Coach Amanda, it's so easy to roll out and affordable that everybody's being given them. So it's not like, do you want a coach? Yes, give it to me. It's like, hey, 1,000 managers around the world, here's your new robot coach. Good luck. And so it's a voluntary usage. So the people who are saying, we really don't want that, they're also the ones when we ask, and we do ask, how motivated are you to become a better leader on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best? They're usually a 1, 2, or a 3. They admit, I don't want to become a better leader. And it's either because they think they're good enough, or they just don't think they have time, or they just don't care. So it's that internal motivation factor that is the biggest driver.
Very cool. I can't wait to download Amanda. I'm going to do it right after the show. I wanted to give you a moment as well, just because we're close to time here, to talk about the LEADx podcast. So take us through what listeners are going to get when they tune into that.
Yeah, so I mean, we're up to, I think, 380 episodes over 3 years. And, it's another thing that when we launched, we were doing it daily. And Dr. Richard, a lot goes into doing podcasts. So it was a labor of love, but it was a lot of labor in that first year. And we scaled it back to becoming a weekly. And now we do sort of seasons because it's just gotten a lot harder to put together. But we just bring on, a lot of your listeners would know them, some of the great guests out there, everyone from, big name CEOs to leadership authors, gurus, and every now and then, like probably the most famous and not obvious leadership person I had was Alan Alda from MASH fame.
Right, absolutely.
And you're, if you're of my age, he's the only one I was kind of starstruck by. I interviewed him, in person in New York. And it was horrible, Dr. Richard, because he launched a book about communication and like active listening, but that's not what he would call it. And so as he's telling me about the importance of looking someone in the eye and really focusing on what they're saying, he's saying all this to me, in my head is the dialogue like, I can't believe I'm face to face with Alan Alda. This is Alan Alda. So as he's talking about great communication, I was not communicating and listening very well because I was so stunned. That was the worst host. I was off my game, with him. But we just interview lots of people, and we always try to say, give us your best advice, back for when you were a first-time leader, first-time manager. Tell us about your war stories. We like to really get in the weeds with it. So I hope people will check it out.
Outstanding. I love it. Well, we are at time. This has been a really cool conversation. You know that I like to wrap up every episode by asking my guest a single question, and that is, what is your biggest helping that one most important piece of information you'd like somebody to walk away with after hearing our conversation today?
I think it comes down to this. I hope everybody that listens realizes that leadership isn't a choice. You are a leader, whether you want to be one or not. Why do I say that? If leadership boils down to influence, and when you ask John Maxwell, you ask Ken Blanchard, you ask everybody to boil down the fancy definitions, say ultimately leadership is influence. Well, then what we know from behavioral psychology, you know it better than I do, Dr. Richard, we are influencing people all the time, whether we want to or not. It's just whether we're influencing them in a positive direction or a negative direction. You know, if I'm in line at the cafeteria and it's the dessert area, if I grab the apples, the person next to me, a complete stranger, is more likely to grab the apples. If I'm grabbing that chocolate pudding, they're a little bit more likely to grab that, chocolate pudding. Whether you're at home, or at work, you are leading your family, you're leading your team members, you're leading people out there. So I just say, don't take your actions for granted. When you speak up, you're influencing people. When you choose to stay silent, you're influencing people. When you take action, you're influencing people. But if you're a bystander, that's influencing people. So you're always influencing people. So please lead with intent. Be mindful of your power. Be mindful of your leadership power and lead with intent.
Well said, Kevin. Tell us where people can connect with you.
The best way is the company website is LEADx.org, LEADx.org. But I'm on all the social media stuff. So just look for KRUSE, my last name Kruse, on Twitter, or I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to send me an email, I'm at kevin@leadx.org. The book, Great Leaders Have No Rules, available on Amazon and everywhere, and that'd be great.
Maybe we can have Coach Amanda spam your email address with. No, in all seriousness, this was a really great episode. Thanks so much for coming on the Daily Helping.
Thanks, Dr. Richard.
And thank you as well to each and every one of you who chose to spend your time listening to this episode today. If you like what you heard, go subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, because this is what helps other people find the show. But most importantly, do something nice for somebody today. I know we're all stuck in our homes, but we've got internet and phones and ways to connect with people we haven't talked to in a long time and surprise them. Do something awesome for somebody else today. Post in your social media feeds using the hashtag MyDailyHelpingToday, because the happiest people are those that help others.